It was a Thursday night, sometime around 9, and I had the apartment to myself. My boyfriend Marcus was working the late shift at the warehouse and wouldn't be home until after 2. Normally, that didn't bother me. I liked the quiet, but that night the silence felt heavier than usual. Our place was small, ground floor, 2-story complex, cozy but old, thin walls, cheap blinds, a tiny porch with a single flickering light. My dog Baxter usually barked at every sound. Footsteps, deliveries, even leaves hitting the door. But that night, he was curled up by the couch, head on his paws, calm for once. Outside, the wind had picked up. I could hear it pressing against the windows, dragging a fine drizzle across the glass. I was halfway through folding laundry, streaming Criminal Minds, texting Marcus between sips of cheap white wine. It was an ordinary night. Comfortable, predictable, quiet. At least it was until Baxter's head suddenly lifted and his ears went stiff. His ears twitched first. Then he lifted his head, gave a single low growl, and bolted off the couch. I thought he'd gone to the door. He always did. But instead, he shot straight down the hallway and disappeared under the bed. No barking, no pacing, just silence. That had never happened before. The knock came a second later. Slow, polite, and careful. 3 taps, a pause, then 2 more taps. It wasn't the hurried rapping of someone needing help. It was too measured. I hesitated before peeping through the peephole. 2 kids stood on the porch. A boy and a girl, maybe 9 or 10 years old. Both were pale, skin nearly gray beneath the porch light. The boy had sandy hair, short and uneven. The girl's was dark and stringy, clinging to her cheeks like she'd been caught out in a rainstorm. Their clothes didn't fit the night or the decade. They were thin cotton jackets, old jeans rolled at the cuffs, shoes scuffed white around the toes. The kind of clothes you see in faded photos, not on living kids. No adults were behind them either. No car in the lot. Just 2 figures staring at my door. A chill ran up my arms, but I told myself it was nothing. Probably neighbors' kids. Probably the wrong apartment. Hopefully. I unlatched the deadbolt, but kept the chain fastened, opening the door just a few inches. The 2 kids didn't move. They didn't smile. They didn't even blink. They stood shoulder to shoulder, hands clasped in front of them like they were waiting for a turn to speak. "Miss," the boy started, voice soft and oddly formal. "Can we come in? Our parents aren't home." My throat tightened instantly for some reason. "Your parents? Where do you live?" I asked. The girl's head tilted a little to the side, like a puppet on a string. "Right here," she said. "Apartment 12. Here's the thing. There was no apartment 12. The numbering stopped at 10. And then it went up to the 2nd floor, and there was a 2 in front of all of those numbers. The boy added, "Your boyfriend said we could wait here until he got back." Every muscle in my body went cold. I hadn't said Marcus's name to anyone, not even online that night. Then the girl glanced past me, eyes flicking down the hallway. "Baxter's scared," she whispered. I slammed the door shut, heart hammering. I grabbed my phone and tried to call Marcus, but the screen froze on the dial. Text wouldn't even send. Even the little Wi-Fi symbol disappeared like it had been erased. Another knock followed, but it was softer this time. Just so polite. "Please," the boy said through the door. "We just need to come in for a minute." The lights flickered once, then twice, then dimmed to a dull orange color, and I about had a heart attack because I thought the entire power grid was going to go out. The TV even sputtered. It cut the sound mid-sentence. For a moment, the actors' faces froze on the screen, and the image then dissolved into static for a second, and then came back all weird and distorted like it was pixelated or something. The apartment fell silent, except for the wind outside, and it was scratching at the window. Honestly, the wind sounded like something was trying to get in the window, too. I checked my phone again. Black screen. Not even a dead battery message. Just black. I hit the light switch by the door and nothing happened. The power wasn't out entirely. The air conditioner still hummed faintly, but everything else was wrong. Like the whole apartment was losing power or something. Or at least, the power was draining. Outside the door, the knock returned, followed by that same calm voice. "Please, miss, let us in just for a moment." Their tone hadn't changed. No impatience, no fear, just this quiet insistence like they were trying to convince me to let them in. I called for Baxter, hoping for backup, but the damn dog didn't come. When I peeked into the bedroom, I found him hidden under the bed, eyes wide and ears pinned back. He whimpered once and then buried his face against the floor. Hell of a guard dog, huh? And then the knocking came again. Perfectly spaced, perfectly polite, always the exact same. "It's cold out here," the girl said. "We can't come in unless you say we can." That last part hit like a weight against my chest. Unless I said they could? Like they needed some kind of invitation? They stopped knocking and went quiet for a while. The silence stretched so long I almost convinced myself they'd left. I was inching towards the window when a sound broke the stillness. That soft, rhythmic tapping against the door. This time it wasn't a knock, though. It was a pattern. Tap, 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 pause. Tap, then a whisper. "Lena." My name. Spoken slowly, perfectly pronounced. I froze. Those kids out there couldn't have known that. My name wasn't even on the mailbox, and I sure as hell hadn't introduced myself to them. "Lena," the boy repeated, a little louder this time. "Baxter's scared. Marcus will be home soon." Hearing my boyfriend's name felt like a punch to the ribs. They said it with a casual familiarity, like they'd known us for years. Except he wasn't going to be home for hours. I was alone with these kids, or something dressed as kids, outside knocking on my door, saying things that they couldn't possibly know. I yelled at them. I said, "Stop! Leave me alone!" The only answer was the sound of palms pressing against the door and streaking down, like they were rubbing their hands across the wood. I could hear the faint squeak of their skin on the wood. And I think I could feel it too, like in my chest, like the pressure was seeping through the seams and into the apartment. The air actually grew heavy and colder. It was so thick it felt like it was pushing against my lungs. The entire situation was going from weird to horrifying. "Lena," they said again, voices overlapping now, toneless and wrong, every way that a black-eyed child's tone always is. "Just let us in, just for a moment." I backed away until my shoulders hit the wall. My heart was slamming so hard I thought I might actually faint. I was getting dizzy. My head was starting to spin. I wanted to open the door just to make it stop, but some instinct, deep and primal, told me not to. The tapping shifted into whispers again, but now the words weren't just my name. They were words that shouldn't exist outside of my apartment walls. "Lennybug," the girl's voice murmured, which was Marcus's silly little pet name for me. A name that I hated, but he used it anyway when we were alone. Nobody else knew that he called me that. And then the boy added, "Don't slam the cabinet, Marcus," in a perfect imitation of my voice. My stomach lurched. That's what I'd snapped at him about during our last argument 2 nights ago. How in the hell could these things know that unless they were there or reading my mind? Either way, it didn't make me feel any better. Baxter was now whimpering from under the bed, claws scraping the floor as he pushed himself further and further back. The sound of him hiding, a dog who's faced down thunderstorms and fireworks without blinking, well, that cracked something inside me. I was sweating, dizzy, a strange heat and cold fighting in my chest because part of me wanted to fling the door open and help them, to comfort them. Something about them said these are just children and they need your help. But I think that's the part of them that tries to convince you to open the door and let them in, and then who the hell knows what happens after that. But another part of me screamed at me to stay put. It said, "You idiot, if you open the door, that will be the last thing that you ever do." It said nothing waiting out there is a child. Honestly, it felt like my own mind was splitting down the middle. One voice pleading, one voice warning. And I'm not exaggerating. That's what I felt inside. It was like I was arguing with myself about what to do. My hand shook as I grabbed my phone again. I opened the camera, trying to hit record. The screen glitched, froze, then black. It died again. No sound, no image, no frozen mess. Just on and then off. I knew it was whatever was out there pretending to be children that was responsible for the phone and for the other power surges. They didn't want me to call for help. They wanted me intimidated. They wanted to feel the fear that I was feeling, because maybe that's something that they survive on. Outside, the whispers grew softer, like a lullaby made of my secrets. Each note pulling at me, telling me that it would just be easier if I opened the door, if I gave in to them and let go. Honestly, I don't know how long this went on for. Minutes, hours, forever? The whispers rose and fell like the tide, and then just as suddenly as they started, they stopped. The silence that followed was awful. I was just waiting for them to start pounding or crashing through a window. I stood in it, waiting, hardly daring to breathe. Then the boy's voice came one last time, soft and flat through the door. "Lena, we will get in. Not tonight, but one day." Footsteps followed, light and slow. I pressed my eye to the peephole and saw them moving down the hall toward the stairwell. They didn't run, didn't look back. Their movements were too smooth, too fluid, like film skipping frames or something. They took a turn to the left, away from the stairwell, towards the entrance. The door opened and closed without a sound. And then almost immediately, the power hummed back to life. The light steadied, my TV flickered on with a burst of sound that made me scream. My phone started buzzing in my hand. The screen was lighting up with missed calls and messages from Marcus. From the bedroom, I heard Baxter crawl out. He came to me, tail tucked, eyes wide. I sat on the couch the rest of the night, shaking, my back pressed against it. Baxter curled between my legs like he'd never leave again. I had no intentions of moving out of that room. I didn't want to go to my car. I didn't want to leave the apartment. What if they were just out there waiting for me? When Marcus finally came home after 2, I blurted the whole story out at once. The kids at the door, the power dying, the whispers, things that they knew that they shouldn't. The words felt ridiculous leaving my mouth. Marcus held me, but his face said what he didn't. It sounded crazy. The next day I called the complex office. Management said that there were no children around during the security camera investigation. No visitors were logged. There was nothing that said that they were there. He said that maybe, there was a glitch in the video footage, but he couldn't actually guarantee that. There was no proof that those people, or those things, were there at all. That night, I sat up scrolling the internet until my eyes blurred. That's when I found the stories. Black-eyed children. The descriptions matched exactly. I realized how close I'd come to opening the door. Because these things, whatever they really are, they have a way of hypnotizing you, of making you feel like it's a good idea to open the door and let them in. What are they? Not kids, not lost, that's for sure. They feel like a shape, like something wearing the mask of a child, the way a spider wears a disguise. Every instinct in me said they weren't asking to come in because they were polite. They were asking because they had to. It was as if a line had been drawn at my door and they couldn't cross it without my permission. Whatever they are, they need consent. They feed on fear. What do they want? I don't think it's as simple as hurting someone. It felt deeper than that to me. Like they were trying to be invited inside my life, not just my apartment. To slip past whatever barrier keeps them on the outside. The whole time they knocked, I felt like my memories and my emotions were being picked apart. Like they were being tested for weak spots. Like they were being read by these creatures. Where do they come from? I don't think it's one place. Reading the stories, they show up in cities, deserts, mountains, decades apart but always the same. Like an infection looking for a host. They're old, but I don't think they're ghosts. Something else that's learned to mimic innocence because innocence is the quickest way through a door, maybe. Why now? Because we've made ourselves easy prey. Everyone's isolated, glued to screens, distracted. We open our doors to strangers through apps, deliveries, constant notifications. How many times have you had Amazon deliver to you and open the door to greet them? Or Grubhub, or any other type of food service? We've trained ourselves to let things in without thinking. That night, staring at the screen light bleeding into my dark apartment, I realized how close I'd come just to doing that, to letting it in. And I keep thinking, if I had said yes, even once, just one word, I wouldn't be here to tell the story I'm telling you now. I was 22 when it happened, back in 2001. It was in a small town outside of Fort Worth, Texas. I'd just wrapped up a late shift at the restaurant where I worked waiting tables. Closing nights were always brutal. Wiping down booths, rolling silverware until my hands cramped, breathing in that clinging smell of fryer grease that never came out of my clothes. By the time the manager locked the doors, it was just after midnight. The parking lot was near empty, just a scatter of cars belonging to the night crew. The lot lights hummed overhead. One of the lamps in the back row flickered in and out, buzzing every time it tried to catch. I remember hugging my purse tighter to my side as I crossed to my old Honda. I was too tired to care about much except getting home and showering the night off. I slid into the driver's seat, stuck the key in the ignition and turned. Nothing. Not even a click. The engine was dead, silent as the grave. That's when the unease started to crawl in. I twisted the key again, harder this time, as if I could force the engine to wake up. Still, nothing. I popped the hood release, though I knew I wouldn't recognize much beyond a dead battery. I sat there fumbling in my purse for a flashlight, and that's when I noticed movement out of the corner of my eye. At the far edge of the lot, just past the reach of the flickering lamp, two figures were walking slowly toward me. Kids. At first, that's all I registered. Two kids, maybe 10 or 12 years old, side by side in the dark. What stopped me cold was everything else. There were no other cars around, no cars that I didn't recognize. The only cars there were the ones that I knew belonged to my coworkers. And there were no parents trailing behind these children. The night air had a bite to it. I wore a jacket and still felt the chill, but they didn't seem dressed for it. Just thin clothes, short sleeves, no sign of shivering. Every instinct in me screamed that something wasn't right, but logic tried to smooth it over. Maybe they'd gotten separated from family. Maybe they were lost or lived nearby and were cutting across the lot. But this wasn't the kind of neighborhood where kids just wandered alone at midnight. I slid back into the driver's seat, and without even thinking, thumbed the lock button. The heavy clunk of the doors made me feel a little safer, but my hands wouldn't stop trembling on the steering wheel. I knew that I wasn't going anywhere, and they were getting far too close to get out and walk back to the restaurant. They crossed the lot in a straight line, not hurrying or wandering, just straight ahead for me, like they already knew which car was mine. By the time they reached the driver's side, my breath had gone shallow. My hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles ached. Something in me was terrified of these children, and I couldn't explain why. The taller one stepped up to the glass and leaned in just close enough that I could see the faint outline of his face in the yellow light. His voice was small but rehearsed, like he'd practiced the sentence in a mirror. I avoided looking him right in the face. "Excuse me, ma'am. We need a ride. Our parents are waiting." The words hit me like a cold draft. I'd already locked the doors, but I reached over and checked again, pressing the button down just to be sure. The sound of the lock clicking echoed too loudly in the stillness. Something was wrong with them. Their skin looked pale, almost chalky, especially under the lights at night, and their voices carried no rise or fall, just a flat, even tone that made it hard to tell if they were asking or commanding. Their clothes didn't fit the night, like I'd said, but the closer that I got a look at them, they looked outdated, like the shirts were hand-me-downs from another decade, not something kids their age would choose to wear. I couldn't bring myself to look directly into their faces. Every time I got close, my stomach twisted. Instead, I focused on the way the air inside my car suddenly felt icy, like someone had cracked open a freezer door. The taller one leaned in closer, pressing his face toward the window until there was nowhere else for me to look. And that's when I finally saw them. Those eyes. Eyes that I will never forget, even if I live to be 100 years old. There were no whites, no color, nothing human at all, just two solid, endless pools of black. My whole body went rigid. My first thought was that I was hallucinating, that maybe the long shift and the lack of sleep were playing tricks on me, or maybe they were wearing contacts. But then the smaller one stepped into the glow of the lamp too, and his eyes were just the same. Pitch black, round and bottomless, swallowing the light instead of reflecting it. You would think even contacts would show some kind of tampering, but these eyes, they were the real deal. "Please," the taller one said, polite as ever, voice steady and calm. "We can't come in unless you invite us. Please unlock the door." The words made my blood run colder than the sight of their eyes. As he spoke, I realized I could actually see my breath misting in the air. The heater was off. The windows were rolled up tight. The car felt like an icebox. I shook my head, fumbling for the ignition again, twisting the key until my wrist ached, trying to get it to start. The engine gave nothing back. No click, no grind, not even a cough. Just dead silence. The smaller kid tilted his head like he was amused. He tapped one single finger on the glass and said, "Ma'am, it won't work." The way he said it was almost sing-song, like he was enjoying what he was seeing. My pulse started to hammer. They kept repeating their request, tapping the glass in rhythm. "Let us in. Let us in. Please let us in." Each word pressed heavier on my chest, like the air itself wanted me to open the door. And yet, some deep, stubborn instinct told me if I did, I wouldn't leave that lot alive. And then it hit me like a slap. The timing. My car had never given me trouble, not once in the 7 years that I've been driving that thing. It died the second I slid into the seat, and right after that, these two appeared out of nowhere. The thought clawed its way through my head. They're the reason that it won't start. I gripped the key and tried again. Nothing. I jiggled the wheel, pumped the pedal, muttered curses under my breath, prayed, and twisted until my wrist actually popped. The engine stayed silent. The dash lights were dark. All the while, the taller one stood just inches from the glass, watching with that blank, polite expression like a predator giving me time to exhaust myself. And here's another thing. He was so close, he should have fogged up the window with his breath. It was that cold out. I should have seen the breath coming from his mouth. Should have seen the breath coming from the other one. But this one, the taller one, with just inches between him and the glass, anytime he talked, you should have seen some kind of steam fog up the window. But there was nothing. I don't think these things even breathe. And then I looked up and I saw it. The faintest curl of this evil smile on the pale lips. "It won't work until we're inside," he said. The smaller one nodded in eerie agreement, as if the two of them were part of the same voice. My stomach twisted. They weren't guessing, they weren't bluffing, they knew what was going on with my car. Every instinct I had screamed that I was trapped. The doors might as well have been paper, the locks nothing more than toys. I felt the sharpness of being manipulated, like a bug in a jar, waiting for them to pop the lid off. My fingers shook on the key. I wanted to run, but where the hell was there to go? If I opened the door, I'd be stepping right into their waiting arms. If I stayed, I was at their mercy. Either way, I felt their control tightening, squeezing the hope out of me with every second that passed. And still, their voices pressed against me, calm and insistent. "Just let us in. We won't hurt you. It'll only take a minute." What will only take a minute? That's what I thought, but I didn't dare ask them out loud. My hands were sweating on the wheel, and for the first time that night, I felt this real, bone-deep terror, like I was not going to get out of there alive. It wasn't nerves or unease. It was pure, undiluted fear. The kind that makes your chest tighten until it feels like your ribs might snap. I couldn't think of a plan. Couldn't think of who to call. My phone was useless anyway. The battery died earlier. I was going to charge it on my way home. And then, without meaning to, my lips started moving. Words I hadn't thought about in years slipped out in a broken whisper. A prayer I remembered from childhood church. It wasn't polished, wasn't even complete, just fragments. "Our Father, protect me, keep me safe." The point wasn't the words, it was the desperation behind them. The reaction of these things was instant. The taller one's expression shifted. The polite mask cracked. His mouth tightened into something thin and ugly, and the smaller one actually bared his teeth like he was snarling. It wasn't a smile, it was something animalistic, sharp and unnatural. They both pressed closer to the glass, voices no longer calm. The taller one hissed, "Stop that!" The younger one's voice pitched higher, sharp enough to feel like it was actually scraping the air. "Open the door," he snapped, slamming a small hand against the window so hard that the glass rattled. I thought that they were going to shatter it and come in. I realized that there might be power in the protection of prayer. I didn't stop praying. If anything, I prayed harder and faster, clinging to the words like a lifeline. The more I prayed, the less human they looked. Their skin seemed to stretch tightly across their faces. Their eyes were gleaming like ink in a jar, and their voices twisted from polite to almost furious. My fear was still there. It was crushing me, but underneath it was this flicker of stubborn defiance that was rising up. Whatever they were, they hated the prayer, and that was enough reason to keep going. I kept whispering, my voice hoarse and shaky until my throat burned. Each word felt clumsy and frantic. I tried more and more just to remember what the prayer sounded like. I just kept repeating the same thing over and over. "Protect me, keep me safe, protect me, keep me safe. Dear Lord, my Father, keep me safe." The taller boy stopped first. He froze, his expression twisted into something dark. The politeness was gone. The smaller one followed him, those black eyes narrowing as if the words were physically pushing them back. I don't know if that was what was happening. I can't even explain what happened in the beginning, but something in that prayer, it either hurt them or disturbed them. They stepped away in perfect unison, movements too smooth to even be natural in my opinion. For a moment, they just stood at the edge of that lamplight, glaring at me through the glass. My breath fogged up inside of the windshield. I was the only one that was doing that. Neither one of them were drawing breath at all. But I could still see their mouths move. They whispered something, low and steady, syllables that I couldn't make out. The sound was muffled through the glass, but it rolled through me like static, leaving my skin actually prickling. Then, without another word, they turned. They didn't run or even walk the way that children walk. They just kind of moved slow and steady toward the far edge of the lot. Their pale shapes melted into the shadows just beyond the flickering lamp, and then they were gone. And almost as soon as that happened, this warm feeling came over me. Like I was free, like that oppression that they brought with them was gone. The air even seemed warmer. The pressure in my chest wasn't as tight. That cold, unnatural stillness that locked the world into place felt like it lifted all at once. I started gasping for air. I didn't even realize that I'd been holding my breath. But all of it made me dizzy, like someone had cut the strings off of a puppet. For the first time since seeing them, I felt like I might actually survive. For a long moment after they vanished, I just sat there. I was frozen, trying to figure out what the hell I was going to do, because I still wasn't about to get out of the car. My hands were clamped on the steering wheel so hard I couldn't even feel my fingers, and I might as well have just blended in with the steering wheel. I didn't want to try the key again. I was terrified that it would stay dead and they'd come back if it failed. But eventually, even though I was trembling, I reached down and turned it. The engine roared to life instantly. Not even a sputter, just a smooth, steady roar of the engine, like nothing had ever been wrong in the first place. The dash lights glowed bright, the heater hummed back on. My car wasn't broken. It had never been broken. It was altered by those things that were pretending to be kids. I slammed it into gear and tore the hell out of that parking lot without once glancing in the mirrors. The shadows could keep their secrets. Those little creepy kids could stay in the shadows. I was praying the entire way home, and I wasn't going to give them another second of my attention. I was driving so fast that the highway lights were basically blurring past me, and this reality settled in heavily. Whatever I had experienced, there was no rhyme or reason for it. There wasn't an explanation. Science couldn't define what happened. What I saw weren't stranded kids. They weren't lost. They weren't even human. Not in any way that made sense. They were tied to what happened, connected to the car failure, the reason that I felt like I did the entire time that I was trapped in that car. It wasn't a coincidence they appeared when my engine died. You will never convince me otherwise. It was a trap. These things can manipulate machines. They were waiting for me to give them what they wanted. They wanted me to feel vulnerable enough to open the door, or ask them for help, or even step out of the car because I had nowhere else to go. And they knew that. And the only thing that stopped them was the one thing I never thought I'd reach for again. Prayer. I don't know why it worked, but it did. It kept them out. And so the only thing that I have to say about that is thank you, God. You saved my life.